Hello, my name's Phil and I work for the Customer Services Department at the Hozelock head office in Birmingham. With over 50 years horticultural expertise, we at Hozelock understand the rewards of gardening and want to help you get the best from your garden. First thing to do is remove this display card, which is on the product when you buy it from now. So you just pull it off and unclip it from the bottom. Now to get the parts out, we first need to take all of the hose out. So to do that, we're going to turn the reel upside down. And we're going to remove this card that retains all the parts. You can just pull that out and tear it if you need to. And again, put that out of the way. Now all the parts that you're going to need to assemble the reel are inside here. To get those out, we first need to remove the hose. So to do this, we're going to rotate the drum round until we can see the end of the hose that's on the outside of the reel, which I've located here. And you'll see that the hose is retained by some strapping, so we're going to cut the strapping with a pair of scissors, not a knife, so that you damage the hose. So we cut the strapping first and pull the strapping out. We can then grab the hose that's on the outside of the coil, grab the end and pull that out. Continue to pull all of the hose out until it's outside the case. Don't pull too fast so that you tangle everything up inside. Pull nice and slowly, it won't take very long. So we've removed all of the hose and we've managed to locate all of the parts that's inside the reel. The first thing we need to do is fit the handle to the side of the reel. Now it's important that you realise that when you fit the handle you must rotate it in the direction of the arrow shown here when you rewind the hose. The arrow is on both sides of the reel and you can put the handle on any side of the reel that you want, but once you've fitted it you can't change your mind. Open the bag and locate the handle from one of the bags. I'm going to fit it onto this side of the reel. You'll see on the handle, on the spindle part, there's 4 lugs, as you can see there. Those are going to line up with 4 little slots that are actually in the middle of this black end piece here. So we locate those 4 slots and offer the handle up and then just give it a push to push it inside, and then give it a little tap with the palm of your hand and that's located it in place. You can then rotate it at will. The next 2 parts that we need to fit are the handle part that you're going to actually hold on to when you rewind it. So you need to locate these 2 parts. The first part pushes onto the handle and just clicks into place like so. The second part, the plug, just retains that in place. So you just push it into the middle and push it fully home like that, so that it holds the handle in place. That's the handle part fitted. We now go on to assembling the hose to the inlet. Locate the part that looks like that, that's the layering handle, and that fits so that these 2 lugs fit into these 2 slots in the front of the rollers there, and it just pushes in place. You then locate the small self-tapping screw and that fits into the middle of these 3 slots here. And then you can just put a posi drive or Phillips screwdriver and secure the handle to the rollers like so. We can now refit the hose to the drum. Locate one end of the hose and pass it through the middle of the 2 rollers. If you've got the floor standing version of this reel, you won't have these rollers. You can just push that through the slot anywhere you like. But for the 2-in-1, it goes through the middle of the rollers and then we pull it out from inside through the big aperture at the bottom and pull about 1 metre or 2 out just to make everything easier. So the next 3 parts that we need to locate are the spring, the inlet spindle and the clamping nut, which are these 3 parts here. The first thing to do is slide the clamping nut along the hose so that we don't forget to fit it, with the threads facing the end of the hose, and just slide that out the way. We now take the spring and push the thin end of the spring into the large hole in the inlet spindle like this and push it all the way through so that it appears out the other end, and pull it just to make sure it's fully home. We're now going to fit the hose to the inlet spindle by pushing the spring along the bore of the hose like that and pushing the end of the hose all the way into the spindle. Give it a wiggle from side to side just to make sure it's fully home until it stops and you can't push it anymore. We can then clamp the hose to the spindle by tightening the clamping nut up fully. So we're now going to pull the excess hose back out of the front of the reel so we can pull the spindle into the bore of the hose and pull it out through the outside like that. You have to locate the centre of this drum, and the spindle goes in between the two drums and pushes out through the outside. There's 4 locating lugs on the spindle that you need to locate with the 4 lugs that's on the actual body of the case, and when it's correctly fitted you'll see about 6 to 8 millimeters of thread sticking out of the side of the case like we've got here. The next part we need to locate is this grey tap connector, which looks like that, and that then screws to the outside of the spindle. So holding the spindle on the inside, screw the inlet connector onto the outside like so, and do it up nice and tight. So before we go any further, we need to cut a suitable length of hose to go between our tap and the inlet that we've just fitted to the side of the reel. It's normally about 1.5 to 2 meters, but if you need a piece slightly longer or slightly shorter, that's fine. So we're going to cut that from the end of the main hose. I'm going to cut a piece about 2 meters long like this. With our length of feeder hose cut, we can now fit one of the female fittings to each end of this hose. So again, locate these fittings from the bag sets. They should look exactly the same, and we fit these in a similar manner to we fitted the male spindle when we fitted the hose to the box. So with our 2 female fittings fitted to the end of the feeder hose, we can now use one of them to connect to the inlet of the compact reel. Just pushes on, and the other end fits to our tap. The next job is to fit the nozzle that we're going to use to water our garden onto the end, which is that part there, and that's used and fitted by attaching this female fitting, which is the water stop fitting, which you can tell with the red band round it. Tighten the clamping nut and push the hose nozzle directly into the female fitting and click it into place. Before we wind the hose onto the compact reel, we're going to run water through it just to inflate the hose and make sure that it's fully inflated before we wind it on. So we'll open our tap and water will then start to flow into the reel. If we then hold the grey part still and wind the nozzle anti-clockwise fully, after a few seconds you'll then find water will appear out of the hose nozzle. You can then wind it clockwise to shut the water off, and then close the tap to shut the water supply off. When we've done that, we can then wind the hose onto the reel. At this point, when we're winding the hose on, it's a good idea to stretch the hose as far out up the garden as you can, just to avoid any tangles. And then we can start to wind the hose in. Bear in mind what I said before, we need to wind the handle in that direction, in the direction of the arrow. If you try and wind it in the opposite direction, it will be extremely tight. So make sure you're winding in the direction of the arrow. With the 2-in-1 version, when we're winding in, we can layer the hose neatly from side to side using this handle. If you've got the floor standing version, you haven't got this handle, so what you need to do is just move the reel from side to side just to layer the hose neatly on the drum. But in this case we can use this handle to layer it neatly. Start with the hose over to one side of the case and rotate the handle while slowly moving the layering handle from side to side. We only need to move the layering handle about 12 millimeters for each turn of the winding handle. If you move it any faster, you'll actually layer the hose in the form of a cross, which means it tangles inside. So just move it nice and slow as I'm doing here. So if we've wound the hose nice and neatly and not layered it too quickly, we should find that viewing through the front here, we should have the hose layered quite neatly across the drum and with no tangles inside. That's it, job done.